Hello everybody, Beard Reads Books here, and welcome to this week's Saturday book review video, in which I'll be reviewing the book The Windrush Betrayal by Amelia Gentleman. This book deals with the scandal that befell the Windrush generation, what became known as, what referred to as the Windrush generation. In 1948, about 492 people from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago arrived in Britain on a ship called the MV Empire Windrush. And over the course of the next 2 decades or so, up until sort of the very early 70s, many thousands of other people came from the Caribbean, like Caribbean countries, to Britain to sort of help fill jobs in the newly formed NHS and in like the expanding sort of railway networks, getting jobs like helping like rebuild Britain after the war. And these were people coming from countries that were then part of the British Empire. They like part of like the Commonwealth. Like they came from Commonwealth countries. And because they were coming from Commonwealth countries, they were, as far as the law was concerned, British citizens. So, from a legal point of view, them moving from Caribbean countries to England was exactly the same as somebody moving from, say, Scotland to England. They were British people, simply moving from one part of Britain to another, for want of a better way of putting it. They had legal status in Britain. They were legally allowed to live here. And what basically happened is they fell foul of later laws, sort of modern laws. Because prior to 2010, David Cameron, the then leader of the Tory party, one of the comments he made in the run up to the 2010 general election was all about trying to cut immigration levels. He wanted to target illegal immigrants, and he wanted to target stop illegal immigrants coming into the country, cut the number of illegal immigrants that are already in the country, and get that number of illegal immigrants in the country down to the tens of the thousands. It was a figure that he'd kind of plucked out of thin air, and it was an unrealistic ambition, an unrealistic goal that, having won the 2010 general election, albeit as part of a coalition government, he could have quite happily, from what I've read, he could have quite happily kicked those plans into the long grass if it hadn't been for the fact that the likes of UKIP were sort of gaining popularity, gaining support from the likes of the voters that wanted to see the number of illegal immigrants cut. So David Cameron, he had UKIP sort of snapping at his heels, chomping at the bit, all to do with illegal immigrants. And David Cameron found himself in a position where even though he wanted to kick these plans, his plans to cut immigration, like illegal immigrants, down to the tens of thousands into the long grass, if he did that, he'd potentially lose a lot more Tory support to the likes of UKIP. And so, in an attempt to sort of try and retain Conservative support, he had to sort of focus on these plans to cut the number of illegal immigrants. And what happened was, like, the Home Office became very sort of target driven, and it was very much a tick box exercises to try and cut numbers down. Because obviously, sort of we had, following the 2008 recession, when like they had the coalition government coming in 2010, we had all this sort of Tory austerity, cutbacks, and all the rest. So the Home Office, sort of very very low budget, cutbacks to the budget. They're understaffed and all the rest. Understaffed, overworked. Very much target driven. Very much a tick box exercise. And what happened was, all these sort of Caribbean people, the people who sort of became referred to as the Windrush generation, they found themselves in the situation where they were being incorrectly labelled as illegal immigrants, largely because they didn't have the paperwork that the government demanded that they provide to prove that they were proper British citizens. I mean, some of the Windrush generation, they'd come in on the family members' passports, which was at that time perfectly legal and acceptable. I mean, obviously some of them had come in on their own passports, but over the years, intervening years between arriving and between all this issues kicking off, those passports had been lost. And because a lot of the Windrush generation had ended up in jobs that weren't necessarily all that well paid, these were people who couldn't really afford holidays, let alone foreign holidays. Therefore, they'd never got new passports. You know, lots of them hadn't got their learned how to drive, so no driving license, things like that. And so they personally didn't have the proper official paperwork that the government were demanding to see as proof that they were residents. And various bits of paperwork that at one point the government had held, various government departments had held, had at various points, for various reasons, been lost, destroyed, and all the rest. And this Windrush generation, they were suddenly finding themselves in a situation where, even though they are British citizens, even though they've got every right to be in this country, and even though they've been spending basically the vast majority of their lives, you know, from little kids right up, decades of their lives living in this country, working in this country, contributing to this country, paying their taxes and all the rest, they were being falsely accused of being illegal immigrants. And now, officially in this country, the legal standpoint is innocent until proven guilty. But, and I mean, in this particular situation, it was the wrong way round. The government were turn around to the Windrush generation and said, "You're illegal immigrants, Windrush generation saying, no, we're not. And the government was saying, prove it. Prove you are not an illegal immigrant. Prove you are here legally and all the rest, and that you are a British citizen. Guilty until proven innocent. And the government were putting the onus on the Windrush generation to prove that they were innocent. Whereas it should officially have been the other way around. It should be, the onus should have been on the government to prove the Windrush generation were guilty and illegal immigrants. And I mean, this book, this is sort of detailing sort of how the situation arose, how describing the sort of what happened to sort of bring around, that caused this situation to arise where these people were being falsely accused, and sort of going into details and as to how and why they were struggling to prove their innocence. And it also going into sort of the effects, what was happening to these people and what the effects it was having on them. A lot of them losing their jobs. Because, I mean, some of the legislation that was being brought in was, if a company is found to be employing an illegal immigrant, the company gets heavily fined. So the Windrush generation, a lot of them, like I said, they had jobs. As soon as the companies they were working for got wind of the fact that they were being accused of being illegal immigrants, the companies were dropping these people quicker than a hot potato for fear of being attacked by the government. It's like they were afraid the government would turn around and say, hang on, you're employing an illegal immigrant, we're going to fine you heavily. They didn't want to be fined heavily, so they thought, right, okay, this person's been accused of being an illegal immigrant, we're going to let them go. People have been losing their jobs through no fault of their own. Some of them, they were being deported back to Jamaica. They'd come from Jamaica to Britain as children, sort of 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe like sort of 10, 11 years old, and all of a sudden, many decades later, sort of in their 50s, 60s, having spent many decades living in Britain, they're suddenly being told, you're an illegal immigrant, we're going to send you back to Jamaica, back to your country. These are people that have spent decades living in Britain. Britain's their country, their home. The only time they've lived in Jamaica was many decades ago as little children for probably only a handful of years, and the vast majority of their life's been in Britain, and they're suddenly being told, you're an illegal immigrant, go home, we're sending you back to Jamaica. And Amelia Gentleman, she's a journalist with The Guardian, and it was through her work and the work of The Guardian newspaper, sort of bringing it to light and exposing what was going on and really fighting the corner. It was them that finally managed to get the Tory government to act. And they finally, back in 2018, it all came out, and the government started to made apologies. Oh yeah, we made a mistake. Well, they're pretty much forced to admit the fact that they made a mistake. They couldn't really not, considering the damning evidence proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they'd made a mistake. So they'd admitted it, and from what I've read, they have very, 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 very slowly started to make small steps towards correcting the situation. From what I've read, they're sort of still dragging their feet on it a bit. And I'll be honest, guys. Reading this, in one way, it was very easy to read. It's. I mean, I read through it in about half a week. That's how easy it is to read through. But on another sense, it's very hard to read because to read about how these people got treated, spending pretty much their entire lives helping rebuild this country sort of after the war, working hard, paying into the system, paying their way, paying their taxes and all the rest, contributing to society. And all of a sudden being falsely accused of being illegal immigrants and being kicked out of the country and all the rest, unemployed, which pushed them into goodness knows how many thousands of pounds of debt and all the rest. I mean, the reason why the name the Windrush generation came about, why that name came about, was because obviously, as I said at the start of the video, in '48, the first lot of people coming into the country came on the MV Empire Windrush, and then it just the name Windrush generation it became I think it was coined by a journalist, but it just became an easy way to refer to all the people who came from the Caribbean to Britain over the course of the next 20 odd years. And the way they got treated, look, it was wicked. Absolutely flipping wicked. The way they got treated. I mean, this incident, the Windrush scandal, it takes the great out of Great Britain. I mean, when I sort of reading through it and I'm reading about the way the government treated these people, I personally just thought to myself, can I really look at this country? Can I really look at Britain and call it Great Britain? I don't think I can call it Britain. We've got a checkered history, this country, our colonial past, our empire. It's not much to be proud of. And this is just another bad chapter, another disgusting chapter in our history. I mean, I was just about to say it's another bad chapter in our colonial history, but I mean, we haven't got a colony nowadays. We haven't got an empire nowadays, but I mean, it has got sort of. I mean, it has to an extent got ties to our empire. I mean, the people who like the Caribbean, I was reading that their ancestors originally came from Africa, but it was the British Empire that brought these people from Africa to the Caribbean countries to work in the sort of the British Empire sugar plantations. And then, so sort of slaves on the British Empire sugar plantations, and and then centuries later, the descendants of those people come from what was then a Commonwealth country to Britain and get shafted by the government, so the descendants of slaves of the British Empire come to this country to work, contribute, pay their way, be decent people, and get shafted by the government. And there's some things that Britain can be proud of, some things that Britain have done good. But this whole Windrush scandal, it's not a good, it's not one of those things. Yeah. This book, even though it's hard to read because it's about a subject that's absolutely a horrible subject, I would highly recommend reading it, because this book does a very good job of describing and explaining what exactly happened. And I mean, when it was all in the news back in 2018, to my discredit, I didn't really follow the news all that much. I was sort of aware of it, but didn't know much about it. And reading this book, this really brought me up. This did a very good job of bringing me up to speed on the whole situation, on what the Windrush Betrayal is all about. So, if you, like me, want to know what it was all about and learn more about it and get a good working knowledge of the situation, I would highly recommend this book. But just bear in mind, it's not necessarily easy going, purely because of the subject it's dealing with. It's like I said earlier on in the video, the way these people got treated, absolutely wicked. Absolutely wicked. But anyway, guys, I've just noticed I'm been talking for the best part of 25 minutes, so this is going to be one of my longer book review videos. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. And have any of you read this book? If you have, let me know in the comments what you thought of it. I'll be interested to know your thoughts. So yeah, please comment. I look forward to hearing. So anyway, I'm going to bring this video to an end. And like I said, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. I look forward to seeing you in next Saturday's book review video. And in the meantime, guys, take care. Happy reading.